Hello everyone, I am Dr. Deepak Kumar, Assistant Professor, Department of Humanities, the Bhopal School of Social Sciences. In this series of lecture on the history of constitutional development in India, which we began with the Regulating Act of 1773, ends with the last act, that is Indian Independence Act 1947. And this last act is our today's topic. This act, together with introduction, background, main provisions, significance and impact, takes a lot of time. And because of that, we have divided it into two parts, of which part 1 we will discuss today, that is background and context, in which we will see the social, cultural, political and religious conditions under which this act was enacted. This act was an act of the Parliament of the United Kingdom. The act received the royal assent on 18 July and it came into effect on 15 August 1947. The act was introduced when at that time the government of Prime Minister Clement Attlee, and at that time Governor General was Lord Mountbatten. So what is Indian Independence Act? Answer to this question is that this act did three most important things, which are: first, the act terminated the British Raj in India after nearly 200 years of colonial rule. Second, the act divided British India into two new independent dominions of India and Pakistan, and this division was based on religious lines. Third, the act granted full political independence to both India and Pakistan as separate nations with effect from August 15, 1947. Apart from these, the act is also important because if we compare this act with the previous act, we will find that unlike the previous acts that expanded Indian participation in governance, this act granted full political independence to India and Pakistan. Unlike previous act, which introduced only this limited self-rule, this act granted both nations complete self-governance. The period between 1942 and 1947 was a dynamic one in which we see a lot of development taking place in India as well as in Britain. But specifically in India, we see that Indian independence movement led by Congress and Muslim League demanded complete independence from British rule. And because of this, there was a growing tension between Hindus and Muslims as they were now demanding their own separate nations. Seeing this, the British government decided that they will end their rule in India. For that, now it's easier said than done. The British government, to implement the negotiations, sent a lot of missions and plans to India. Cripps Mission 1942, in which they proposed that dominion status for India after World War II. But this mission was rejected by Congress as it didn't promise full independence. Next, in 1946, Cabinet Mission was sent, which proposed increased Indian participation in Executive Council. This also failed. And then finally, in 1946 and 47, Mountbatten Plan was sent. Cripps Mission 1942. The Second World War created a demand in Britain for the new declaration of policy towards India. And because of this new direction, the British cabinet decided that they will send Sir Stafford Cripps, who was a war cabinet minister at that time, to try for a settlement through direct negotiation with the Indian political parties. He arrived in India on 22nd March 1942 and presented his proposal for consideration among the Indian political leaders. This proposal proposed an aim to create a self-governing Indian Union with the British Commonwealth. It also proposed an elected body for drafting a new Indian constitution with participation from Indian states. But these proposals came with a condition which was unacceptable. That was that the British government would implement the new constitution and maintain defense responsibility until then. And now because of this condition, the plan faced criticism from various Indian groups for not adequately addressing their concern. So Cripps' mission was not successful. but it had many consequences. Now, Indians were dissatisfied. So, because of that, All India Congress Committee met in Bombay in August 1942 and resolved that the British should now quit India and allow Indians to address their own problems. Gandhiji led this resolution, but British government swiftly responded by arresting Congress leaders and banning the organization across India. The arrest triggered the widespread August Revolution across India, which resulted in thousands of arrests and harsh suppression by the British government. The Britishers again took an initiative. In June 1946, Lord Wavell, who was then Governor General, announced plans to advance India towards the full self-government and convened an all-party conference in Shimla to discuss these proposals. The main aim of this conference was to form a new executive council representing India's organized political opinions. This conference was attended by Gandhiji, Jinnah, and other representatives of various political parties and minority groups. This plan also failed. It was not successful, especially because of the Jinnah's insistence that the Muslim League was the sole representative of Indian Muslims. Now, because the Cripps mission failed, the Wavell plan failed, British in 1946 again sent another mission, that was the Cabinet Mission in 1946. It was a British initiative, and in Britain at that time, Labour Party was victorious. Japan also surrendered in Second World War. Because of these developments, the British government sent a cabinet mission to India in 1946 to discuss constitutional reforms. Now, this mission plan proposed that a Union of India, which will handle key subjects like defense and foreign affairs with a joint executive legislature. It also called for forming a constitutional assembly for drafting a constitution. There were mixed reactions for this. The plan was not successful, but it was not a failure either. The plan was partially accepted by Congress and fully by the Muslim League, but it faced opposition from the Sikhs. The plan also led to Jinnah's call for direct action, and ultimately it eventually led to the formation of an interim government which functioned until India's partition. In July 1946, elections were conducted and the Constituent Assembly met in New Delhi in December 1946. Although the Muslim League refused to participate in these meetings, the Constituent Assembly acted in dual capacity. First, it acted as an interim government, and second, it acted as the constitution making body. Now, cabinet mission was not successful fully. Because of this, the next negotiation, that is the Mountbatten Plan in 1947. In Britain, at that time, Prime Minister Attlee announced that June 1948 was the deadline date to hand over power, and he tasked Lord Mountbatten for this transferring power to India, considering the demand for a separate Pakistan by Mr. Jinnah. In May 1947, Mountbatten came up with a plan that is known as the Dickey-Bird Plan, in which he proposed that provinces or the princely states be declared independent successor states and then be allowed to choose whether to join the Constituent Assembly or not. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru strictly opposed it, saying that it would lead to balkanization of the country. So he came up with a new plan. Now this time, Lord Mountbatten came up with a June 3rd plan, which is also known as the Mountbatten Plan, in which he proposed that the partition of undivided India into India and Pakistan after consulting with Indian leaders. And he also proposed to establish a boundary commission to resolve territorial disputes. This plan was accepted by both the Muslim League as well as the All India Congress Committee. And this is the plan which was led to enactment of the Indian Independence Act in 1947. So this was the background of the Indian Independence Act, of which we have already discussed the part 1. In the next lecture, we will discuss the main provisions, significance and impact. Thank you.